In this video, I will look at the ESL ELD policies in Ontario and will attempt to answer the following two questions. How inclusive are the ESL policies in Ontario towards English language learners and their first languages? And what happens to the first languages of the English language learners that come to Ontario and attend schools here? To better understand today's language policies, it would be useful to look back at the major historical language policies in Canada. One of the most influential commissions in Canadian history, the Royal Commission on Bilingualism and Biculturalism, RCBB, from 1963 to 1969, brought about sweeping changes to federal and provincial language policy. The commission was a response to the growing unrest among French Canadians in Quebec, who called for the protection of their language and culture and opportunities to participate fully in political and economic decision-making. RCBB focused primarily on English and French languages as belonging to the founding races, while conveniently excluding the Indigenous groups from the final decision-making process. The Commission's findings led to the changes in French education across the country and in the creation of the Official Languages Act of 1969, thereby making English and French the official languages in Canada. Policy processes are never outside of power relations and therefore represent socio-political interests. Powerful founding races with their powerful languages having official status in Canada now. Power and English can be synonymous in the field of linguistics. What does this ongoing power discourse mean for Ontario's current language policies, specifically the ones developed for English language learners, also known as ELLs? These policies are referred to as English as a Second Language, ESL, and English Literacy Development, ELD. These policies are developed and put in effect by Ontario's Ministry of Education. Let's have a look at that. The Education Act of Ontario mandates that the language of instruction can either be English or French in schools across Ontario. Someone once said to me, I came to Canada with two languages, Italian and a little bit of English, but after I finished school here, I left with just one. As an immigrant, an educator, a mother of two young children growing up in Canada, this statement had a profound impact on me. As I continue to think about the rich linguistic diversity present in today's Canada, I can't help but wonder what will happen to the many heritage languages present in Ontario, and in Canada in general, a few decades from now. What will my children's linguistic repertoire look like when they come of age? To better understand this, I decided to analyze how the first languages, also referred to as L1s or home languages, are viewed in the policy documents that are designed for immigrant students. As mentioned before, these policies are referred to as ESL ELD policies by the Ministry of Education. Let's have a look at who's considered an ESL ELD student in Ontario according to the policy. It is important to discuss this topic because immigration is a big source of population growth in Canada, especially in Ontario. To put things in perspective, in 2019, Ontario received 46.2% of all immigrants to Canada, up from 43.1% in 2018. This influx brings in many newcomer students to Ontario schools who would be categorized as ESL ELD students according to the Ministry of Education. This has been the case for at least 3 decades now, where ESL student numbers to Ontario has consistently increased. A surprising fact is that the Ministry of Education didn't have a mandated policy for ESL ELD students up until 2007, although approximately $225 million were being allocated to ESL tools and resources across the school boards in Ontario. But the funding wasn't necessarily being used for ESL language learners. Why? Because it wasn't mandated by the ministry. Let's pause there for a second. In 2005, the Auditor General of Ontario published a report analyzing the funding and the returns on ESL programs, and sure enough, they found huge gaps. As a response, the Ministry of Education came up with their first ever ESL ELD language policy document in 2007, and to this date, This is considered to be the most recent policy documents for ESL ELD programs in Ontario. Upon analyzing the Resource Guide for ESL ELD educators from 2001 and the policy documents from 2007, it is clear that English literacy is at the heart of the matter. Remember the power relations I discussed at the beginning of this video? Those power relations are very much prevalent in these policies, and it is evident from statements like these. Having said that, these policies are certainly open-minded towards the learner's first languages, but primarily referencing it as a resource towards learning English. The wording that's often used in the policy documents is strategic use of first languages. So the word strategic is very key here. Statements like these that are on the screen right now are present throughout the document. Finally, occasional references to maintaining first languages are also made in these policy documents from 2007. For example, academic achievement and successful integration of the English language learners is deemed as an important goal of these policy documents. A closer look at the policy documents reveals strong ideologies of neoliberal globalization and how this phenomenon of neoliberalism has come to impact the educational experiences of racialized and minoritized students and the languages they speak in Ontario. Educators, by virtue of being in the classrooms, play a crucial role in supporting the development of plurilingualism among learners by interactively engaging their repertoire of language knowledge and skills across a range of contexts. Educators are therefore important implementers of language policies. Translanguaging has been gaining a lot of popularity and support in the last decade or so. According to Garcia, it is the act performed by bilinguals or multilinguals of accessing different linguistic features or various modes of what are described as autonomous languages in order to maximize communicative potential. Translanguaging is about communication and not about the language itself. A top-down approach might be trickier and face more bureaucratic challenges than the bottom-up approaches because it would require changing policies and legislations and hence disrupting the embedded power relations. One such policy change was implemented in 2015 when Ministry of Education made it mandatory for all teacher candidates, not just future ESL specialists, to receive pre-service instruction and practical experience of working with English learners. Another bold option would be to make changes to the Education Act of Ontario, allowing for heritage languages to be included as language of instruction. The question is the government ready to change century-old power relations?